Welcome to Tangible Talks podcast. Today we continue our biblical character series with part 2 of Jacob. In our previous podcast, we were introduced to Jacob and spoke about his deceiving his brother Esau and taking the birthright and blessing. We will talk about how in time we will see the fullness of this act. Not to justify the action, but to see how things work. Some knowledge can only be received by walking it out. Today, as we continue, we find that Jacob left home to find a wife at his uncle Laban's. Jacob did find a wife, 4 actually, who produced 12 sons and a daughter. While working for Laban, Jacob was deceived and the table was switched. Jacob was the one deceived by Laban. But during this time, 20 years to be exact, Jacob changed. When we first met Jacob, he described God as the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac. Never is God his God. This changes, but not without a major encounter. Do you find yourself fighting with God, struggling with life? Well, get in line. Jacob literally fought with God, and in the process became Israel. Join us as we discuss Jacob and discover tangible takeaways for our lives on Tangible Talks podcast. Hello, everybody. I'm flying solo today. There's been a few things that have taken place, and Jana is not able to join us today. So I'm going to try and do this podcast by myself. I don't know how well I'll do. I hope I do a good job. And Jana will join us very soon. So we're back on the topic of biblical characters and Jacob, and this is part 2 of Jacob. And where we join Jacob is he's leaving his house. He's deceived his brother Esau. He's somewhat fleeing for his life, really, because Esau wants to kill him. And rightly so. Not necessarily to kill, but would like some kind of retribution for what Jacob seems to have done to Esau. So we start with Jacob leaving his homeland, and he's headed to his uncle Laban's house. Laban is the brother of Rebekah, who is Jacob's mother. And this was basically Rebekah's idea. And so we're going to pick up at a part in the story that is pretty familiar to us. It is, a lot of us call it Jacob's ladder. Genesis 28, verse 12. Jacob had a dream. He saw a stairway erecting on the earth with its top reaching to the heavens. The angels of God were going up and down it, and the Lord stood at its top. He said, and this is God speaking, I am the Lord, the God of your grandfather Abraham and the God of your father Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the ground you are lying on. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west, east, north, and south. And so all the families of the earth will receive blessings through you and through your descendants. I am with you. I will protect you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised. What a wonderful promise God makes to Jacob at this time. And God introduces himself to Jacob in a way that he will know who it is that's speaking to him. God, when he speaks to us, will get our attention. He will speak to us in a way that we will know that he is speaking to us. That's his job. His job is to speak to us in a way that we can understand, and it's our job to listen. Then Jacob woke up and thought, surely the Lord is in this place, but I did not realize it. He was afraid and said, what an awesome place this is. This is nothing else than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. So Jacob realizes where he is and that this is a sacred place. Early in the morning, Jacob took the stone he had placed near his head and set it up as a sacred stone. Then he poured oil on top of it. He called that place Bethel, although the former name of the town was Luz. Then Jacob made a vow. Jacob made a vow. Have you ever made a vow to God? Have you ever spoken to God and said, hey, if you'll do this, I'll do this? Well, this is Jacob's vow. This is where we see humans realizing who they're talking to. God introduced himself to Jacob, but Jacob knows who he's speaking with. It's intuitive. He didn't have to run to someone and say, hey, what do you think? Could this maybe be God? I don't know. What do you think? No, Jacob knew. And this is what Jacob said. If God is with me and protects me on this journey I am taking and gives me food to eat and clothing to wear, and I return safely to my father's home, then the Lord will become my God. Then this stone that I have set up as a sacred stone will be the house of God, and I will surely give back 1/10 of everything you gave me. So Jacob makes a vow with God and says, if you'll be with me, if you'll bless me, and if you'll bring me back to my homeland, then you will be my God. And that, in a way, is the beginning of the conversion. Until this time, Jacob has only heard about God. He's heard about the God of his grandfather Abraham, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac. But it's never been the God of Jacob. I know I've been there in my life where I've heard about God. I've heard about Jesus, but it wasn't personal. I never felt it. I never experienced it. It wasn't personal. And Jacob is beginning. But as we see, it's just the beginning. And thank goodness we have beginnings. But Jacob is a hard nut to crack. I think that's the best way to put it, because Jacob just doesn't give in. Jacob is skeptical. Jacob is hard. And I can relate to that, absolutely relate to it. And so I want to make mention of the dream because dreams and visions are important and they're significant. We'll cover dreams more in the Joseph story, but as a tangible takeaway, I'd like for you to just kind of put in your head, in your mind, dreams and visions, and know that they are significant and have been in the past, and they're significant in the present. So we have Jacob. He gets up, he goes to Laban's house, and he has an encounter with Rachel. Scripture says he falls in love with Rachel immediately. And he's invited to come and stay at his uncle Laban's house. And after a month or so, Laban says, maybe you could work for me. There's some things that maybe you could do for me. And he and Jacob strike up a deal. And this is in Genesis 24, verses 18. And Jacob said, I will serve you 7 years in exchange for your younger daughter, Rachel. Laban replied, I'd rather give her to you than to another man. Stay with me. So Jacob worked for 7 years to acquire Rachel. But that seemed like only a few days to him because his love for her was great. Now, that's a beautiful story. Jacob truly loved Rachel. But I want to call attention to what Laban said when Jacob said, I'll work for you for 7 years in exchange for your daughter. Laban said, I'd rather give her to you than to another man. Stay with me. He never said, yes, I will give Rachel to you. He was vague. It doesn't seem as if it's vague right now. It seems like, well, yeah, that's a good answer. But we see why, looking back, of course, why it's vague. And so finally Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife, for my time of service is up, and I want to sleep with her." So Laban invited all the people of that place and prepared a feast. In the evening, he brought his daughter Leah to Jacob, and he slept with her. Laban gave his female servant Zilpah to his daughter Leah to be her servant. Now that seems like it's just an odd note there, but later on you will see why it's significant in the story. In the morning, Jacob discovered it was Leah. So Jacob said to Laban, "What in the world have you done to me? Didn't I work for you in exchange for Rachel? Why have you tricked me?" And now we see that the table has turned. Jacob is the one that has been deceived instead of being the deceiver. And Jacob will learn a great deal from this. "It is not our custom here," Laban replied, "to give the younger daughter in marriage before the firstborn. Complete my older daughter's bridal week, then we will give you the younger one too in exchange for 7 more years of work." So that's the trick. Laban's going to get Jacob for 7 more years to work for him. And Laban didn't have any problem giving his daughters so that he could get someone to work for him. You can really see who Laban is. When I first read this story, it broke my heart for Leah, because that first night, Jacob thought he was with Rachel, and Leah would have experienced the love from Jacob that later on she didn't experience anymore. I think that that's the best way that I can put that. It just broke my heart for Leah, because she understands that Jacob loves her sister more, and she doesn't feel adequate enough. So here we have in this story the introduction of Rachel and Leah, the introduction of their maidservants, the introduction of the deception, and we see that Jacob is going to work 7 more years for Rachel. Now, Laban had to have known that Jacob loved Rachel so much that he could get 14 years out of Jacob working for him instead of 7. So this is Jacob and his family, the beginning of his family. He has many children, and we see the family dynamic that is just, well, it's kind of crazy. Can you imagine the strife between the sisters? The strife that would bring into the marriage between the husband and the wife. Then when Leah is no longer having children, she gives her maidservant. Rachel started this process. Sounds a little bit like Sarah and Hagar. I don't know if this was a custom during that time or not, but it is what it is. And so we have Jacob working for his uncle and his father-in-law, living among the people and raising a family. The next major part of Jacob's life is when he decides to leave. Jacob is ready. He's had enough. He's had enough trickery from Laban. He's just basically had enough. Have you ever been there? Have you ever been in a place to where today, no more. This is it. I've had enough. It's time. It's time to leave this situation. It's kind of scary to leave, but the fear of where I'm going has to be better than where I am. And I think we have all been there. And so Jacob makes plans to leave. Now, before Jacob has left Laban, he made a deal with Laban. And we need to be careful when we make deals with people, especially if their nature is deceitful. I think this is just one of those little side notes. It's like not like a major theme, but it's a little side note. So Laban asked, "What should I give you?" "You don't need to give me a thing," Jacob replied. "But if you agree to this one condition, I will continue to care for your flocks and protect them." And so Jacob introduces to Laban a thought, and it comes from a dream that God gave to Jacob concerning the flock, concerning how to prosper. Because God promised Jacob in this place that he was going to, that he would be with him and he would prosper him. So in Genesis chapter 31, verse 11, it says, "In the dream, the angel of God said to Jacob," and Jacob said, "Here I am." Sounds a little bit like Abraham, doesn't it? "Observe that all the male goats mating with the flock are streaked, speckled, or spotted, for I observe that all that Laban has done to you." God is saying, I've seen what Laban has done to you. I am the God of Bethel. Notice how God is introducing himself to Jacob now on a more personal level. He's reminding him, hey, I'm the one that spoke to you at Bethel, where you anointed the sacred stone and made a vow to me. Now leave this land immediately and return to your native land. So God is speaking to Jacob, and he's saying, it's time to leave. I've seen everything that's going on. God is the one that gave Jacob the idea of how to prosper with the goats. And I really don't get what the little strips of wood and all these things are. I'm sure that there's some science behind that. But what happens is God gives Jacob a large flock. And at that time, sheep were just like, it was very prosperous. It seems silly that God would give Jacob a dream about goats and how to breed them. But this was prosperity to people back then. And we also hear during this time that we hear about some more of the deceit and the struggle and the lying and the misleading and the hiding and the distorting the truth that happened between Laban and Jacob. But the one thing that really was the key point, I do believe, for Jacob leaving is that Jacob heard Laban's sons grumbling about Jacob. So Genesis chapter 31, the very first verse, it says, Jacob heard that Laban's sons were complaining. Jacob has taken everything that belonged to our father. He has gotten richer at our father's expense. When Jacob saw the look on Laban's face, he could tell his attitude toward him had changed. The complaining, the grumbling, the fault finding is an attack. I think we push past it sometimes and we do not recognize the importance of recognizing grumbling, not participating. But the grumbling and complaining will bring in strife. And when you have strife in your life, there is all kinds of darkness that comes with it. And I'm using the term darkness. I'm using the term that it's evil works. It is a slippery slope. And Jacob recognizes this, and God says, it's time to go. So Jacob sends a message to Rachel and Leah to come to the field where his flocks were. There he said to them, I can tell that your father's attitude toward me has changed. Now, I want to stop here and get your attention and relate it to today and things going on in our life. When you notice someone's attitude has changed toward you, you should pay attention to it. It is a signal. I can't tell you exactly what it will be, but it is a pay attention. Something's going on here. You really need to watch what's going on. So Jacob tells his wives that he has noticed this. You know that I have worked for your father as hard as I could, but your father has humiliated me and changed my wages 10 times. But God has not permitted him to do me any harm. So Jacob is telling his wife, he's being very clear, this is what's going on. Sometimes when a change is coming in our life, we just have to get to the bare minimum. What is going on? This is not a good situation. Talk about the situation. Don't gossip, don't blame, don't fault find. Just call it what it is. And then Jacob goes into, look, if I said the speckled goats are mine, then Laban would change it, and then it would be the streaked animals, etc., etc. And then Jacob also says during this dissertation to his wives that it was God that appeared to him in a dream and talked to him about prospering him and the sheep. So this is the answer that Rachel and Leah give to Jacob. Do we still have any portion of our inheritance in our father's house? Hasn't he treated us like foreigners? He not only sold us, but completely wasted the money paid for us. Surely all the wealth that God snatched away from our father belonged to us and to our children. So now do everything God has told you. So Jacob immediately put his children and wives on the camels. He took away all the livestock he had acquired and the property that he accumulated. Then he set out toward the land of Canaan to return to his father, Isaac. 20 years, and now Jacob is going to go back home. The story tells us that Rachel stole household idols that belonged to her father. And this is very telling. This tells us that Laban was not a worshiper of the God of Abraham and Isaac. He was not a worshiper of the one true God, who we know to be the one true God. And it also says that Jacob deceived Laban by not telling him that he was leaving. And I have to tell you, I've wrestled with this one. I don't see how his leaving was a deception. I haven't seen it yet, but that doesn't mean that because I don't see it that way, that it's not true. The Bible says that Jacob deceived Laban by not telling him he was leaving. So why wouldn't Jacob say anything? And why would Laban's daughters and all the grandchildren, everything they have, just go away when Laban was not in town? They just disappeared. Sometimes I know I have just walked away from a situation. I just walked away from it. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to give any notice. I didn't want to do anything. And that wasn't always the best thing to do. I think Jacob was afraid. I think Jacob saw the opportunity that Laban and his sons were not at home, and it was the perfect time to just get away. And he's going to do that. But Laban comes home, he finds out everyone's left, and he pursues Jacob. He pursues Jacob and the children. And I don't know what was in Laban or what his true intentions were going to be, because it's hard to tell with Laban. Laban doesn't really give you clear insight because he's a deceptive person. So Scripture tells us in verse 31 of chapter 31, Jacob says, I left secretly because I was afraid. Jacob replied to Laban, I thought you might take your daughters away from me by force. Whoever has taken your gods, talking about the one that Rachel took, will be put to death in the presence of our relatives. Identify whatever is yours and take it. And Jacob was angry with Laban because Laban couldn't find the God that was taken from him. He couldn't find anything that Jacob had taken that was stolen. That Jacob did not deceive Laban. His deceiving Laban was when he left without telling him. But everything he had, Jacob had worked for. He had worked very hard for it. And then Jacob says, I've been with you for the past 20 years. And during that time, I worked hard and I didn't take anything from you that was not given to me. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, the one whom Isaac fears, had not been with me, you would certainly have sent me away empty-handed. But God saw how I was oppressed and how hard I worked, and he rebuked you last night. Now, this rebuke that he's talking about is that God came to Laban in a dream. And he says, but God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream at night and warned him, be careful that you neither bless nor curse Jacob. What an interesting thing. God came to Laban, a non-believer, and he said, be careful that you neither bless nor curse Jacob. And he's warning Laban to be very, very careful. And Jacob says that God saw how he was oppressed and how hard that he had worked, and that God rebuked Laban. Have you tried and tried and tried in a situation and it just wasn't going to work out? It had become oppressive. It was just a nightmare. Remember that God is with you. God was with Jacob. God saw the situation and God intervened to the point of talking to Laban and saying, do not bless or curse Jacob, because God has Jacob's back and God has our back. Jacob in this still doesn't call God his God. But Jacob does see God working in his life. God is faithful. The contrast between God's faithfulness and truth compared to Laban's faithfulness and truth is quite a contrast. We can see during this time that Jacob was with Laban, Jacob can truly see how his uncle and father-in-law, someone who should love him and treat him appropriately, changes his wages and takes and takes and takes and doesn't give. And put that in comparison to God, who speaks to Jacob and blesses him. Even in this horrible situation, he blesses him. And so there's a parting of ways between Laban and Jacob is headed home. Should be a really happy time. But Jacob remembers what happened at home, and he remembers, and he is fearful that Esau is going to come for him and that Esau is going to kill him. Jacob is afraid of his brother because Jacob knows exactly what he did to his brother. It's become very clear. He understands deception now because he was deceived. So we have some really interesting dialogue going on, taking place between Jacob trying to appease Esau, sending gifts, dividing up the family, doing all kinds of things. But I think one of the most important lessons that happens for Jacob and I would say has happened in my life, and it may happen in almost everyone's life, is that Jacob is alone. He is afraid. He's afraid he may lose his life. He may lose his family. He may lose everything that he's worked hard for. Have you ever been there? Have you ever gotten to a place that you just don't know that you can take another step? And this is where Jacob is. And he's alone. And in chapter 32, verse 24, we have a major encounter with God. So Jacob was left alone. Now that's a wow moment. How often are you truly alone? Well, or you feel that you're alone. You can feel that you're alone in a room full of people. But Jacob was alone. Then a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he could not defeat Jacob, he struck the socket of his hip, so the socket of Jacob's hip was dislocated while he wrestled with him. Then the man said, "Let me go, for the dawn is breaking." "I will not let you go," Jacob replied, "unless you bless me." The man asked him, "What is your name?" He answered Jacob. "No longer will your name be Jacob," the man told him, "but Israel, because you have fought with God and with man and prevailed." Have you ever been in a situation where you were struggling and fighting, almost fighting for your life? And you thought you were fighting other people. You thought you were fighting someone at your work. You thought you were fighting a family member. You thought you were fighting a friend that had become an enemy. And along the way, you realize you're not fighting them, but you're fighting God. Jacob fights with someone and doesn't know who it is at first. We don't know who it is at first. Not until somewhere in the struggle, in the fight, does Jacob realize who he is fighting with. And we can tell that he realized who it is because he asked for a blessing. Now, if this was somebody that was coming to rob you, if this was somebody that came in and was going to knock you over the head and kill you, you would not continue to fight with them and then ask them to bless you. Jacob needs a blessing. Jacob needs God. Jacob is afraid. It seems like everything is falling apart, and the only thing that will make a difference is a blessing, is that God does something in his life. What is Jacob looking for? He already has children. He has plenty of livestock, which again in his day was wealth. What blessing is Jacob looking for? What blessing are you looking for? Are you at a place in your life now that you find yourself in such a struggle, a wrestling match? Everything is a struggle. Everything is hard. Everything is difficult. You need a blessing. Do you realize that perhaps you're fighting with God? You know, God changes Jacob's name to Israel. And Israel means one who wrestles with God. It says one who wrestles with God. Jacob fought with God and with man, and he prevailed. So when Jacob asked for a blessing, God cuts right to the heart of the matter, which God does. And God says, "What is your name?" Hey, deceiver, someone who manipulates things. Let's not do that. Let's begin again. And so God blesses Jacob with a new name, a new identity. Jacob is becoming a new creature. Look at the redemption process. Look, this is redemption. Jacob believes in God and he has faith. Jacob changes. Israel changes, and you will hear him address God from now on. The God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, the God of Israel. And it's a heart change. It is a life change. It didn't just happen overnight. The wrestling with God and the changing did happen overnight, but it was a buildup of God being faithful and always being there for Jacob, even when Jacob didn't necessarily believe. And the last we see of Israel, or Jacob, is in Egypt. Jacob and all his descendants go to Egypt. And this is a fulfillment of what God told Abraham back in Genesis 15:13. There Jacob spoke with Pharaoh and blessed him. Jacob, Israel, was brought before the king of Egypt. And Jacob blessed the king. Israel then blesses his children and tells them he's about to die. Jacob tells his children in Genesis 49:29, I am about to go to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave in the field of Ephron the Hittite. And then in 31 it says, there they buried Abraham and his wife Sarah. There they buried Isaac and his wife Rebekah. And there I buried Leah. This last note where Israel says, there I buried Leah. Jacob is going to be buried beside Leah, the one who wasn't loved, the one who never measured up. Leah is remembered, and Jacob is buried beside her. This has been a really enlightening series about Jacob. I have to say that I didn't like Jacob coming into this series. I didn't like him. And I think the reason I didn't like him is because I saw so much of me. I saw so much of my trying to get ahead, my deception, my trying to manipulate situations, not relying fully on God. But what is so beautiful is that now this time in my life, I just feel a little bit like Jacob in that I've wrestled and I've kind of crossed over. I've learned from situations in my life. I've learned that there are times you have to confront situations. You just have to confront them. And it's not every situation, because when we get into Joseph, we're going to see that it's not every situation. Sometimes you just need to leave. But there's a right way of leaving. There is growth. There are blessings in the struggle. And we struggle and will struggle with everything. God reminds us of this in the name Israel, ones who struggle with God. We struggle with God. And I hope that you have some tangible takeaways from this study. It's been difficult. I miss Jana. I miss her insight. I miss her comments. I miss her keeping me on track. I have to say it's been a bit of a struggle to do this, but I got through it. And you can get through this. You can get through whatever it is that's going on in your life. And it's going to be, a lot of the times it's going to be with a job, with your health, with your family, with your friends. These situations that surround us is what God uses to perfect us and to redeem us. So I'm going to close in prayer. Lord, thank you for your word. Thank you for the ones that have gone before us, and thank you for their examples. Thank you that you don't cover up and hide the things that can appear ugly. They do not sidetrack you. You don't miss a step because you know that all things work for the good. The things that Jacob went through, the things that we go through, will lead us to you. Help us to realize that you are our God, just as you were the God of Abraham, just as you are the God of Isaac and Jacob. You are our God, and you are with us. And the blessings, the promise that you gave Jacob when he left his home, that you would be with him and that you would bless him, that still remains true today in our lives. Lord, thank you for healing us, for strengthening us, for blessing us. Help us to have an attitude of gratitude, to remember to be thankful. We sure spend a lot of time grumbling and complaining and asking over and over again. But there are times when we forget to be thankful as many times as we complained. Thank you for this podcast. Thank you for the opportunity to come into the lives of other people. And in the name of Jesus, I pray. Amen. Thank you for listening. It is always helpful if you like our podcast or if you like us on YouTube. We'd love to hear comments that you have. They mean a great deal, especially on social media, to prove that you're not a robot and to prove that you are a human being and that you are listening and you are interacting. Next week, we're going to pick up on one of my favorites, which is Joseph. And we're going to talk about Jacob's son, Joseph, and get into some really good stuff. Until then, I hope you have a great day. I hope you're encouraged. I hope you had some tangible takeaways. And we'll see you next week. Bye.